I went and graduated from an all-boys Catholic military college prep high school. I learned about women from Brother Al as we got ready for events with the all-girls Catholic college prep high school down the road. I graduated twice from an engineering university where the male-to-female ratio was 7-1. Might as well have been a boys' school. Thank you. And when I went out to work, I started in a series of staunch old white guy industries. They ran the gamut from everything from military aerospace, where women worked in these huge buildings, windowless, putting together wiring systems for military bombers because their fingers were smaller than men. The oil and gas industry, where an airplane flies every day from Anchorage to the oil wells, and it's full of men. In the power industry in Asia, where women were given shovels and pails to dig the foundations for new power facilities because they could fit down in the holes and it was less expensive than equipment. And to the high-tech industry, where at an IT trade show, you were far more likely to see a woman as a booth babe than as a customer. As I landed in each of these industries, I kept bumping into this disquieting coincidence of 7-1 as a minimum, and in most cases, it was much higher than that. I spent an amazing amount of time on airplanes and in conferences and in meetings, all to listen to a bunch of old, staunch white guys spend an incredible amount of time defending a position that they had already staked out. They weren't interested in a new perspective. They weren't interested in a new way of making a decision. They just wanted to put their ideas into play. As I made my way through these highly monochromatic industries, I started to think that maybe men only see part of the solutions. Maybe they'd only have one of the ways of dealing with problems. I was fortunate enough to have women work on my project teams and on my staff. And as I worked with women, I started to recognize that there was maybe another alternative, another approach to solving problems. And the more that I worked with women, the more I realized that this approach has value. It's important. I had begun my journey to become an unlikely feminist. Thank you. Current science shows us and has begun to validate some of my long-standing observations of men. Our brains are highly compartmentalized. There are very few connections between the creative and the analytical side. When we think about data, we deal with it linearly, and we always apply analytical reasoning to the problems that we deal with. We work in a convergent world. We try to throw away pieces and parts until we arrive at a usually pre-expected solution. And when we deal with data, we put it in silos that aren't connected to each other, and we toss out the extraneous data. And yes, it is true, I can say it to this crowd, we can only focus on one thing at a time. Yes, truly. So, with a man's brain and a long-standing tradition of old white guy industries and schools, it's kind of unlikely that I would become a feminist. But rather than be afraid of this new perspective that I learned from women, I went in search of it. I sought out smart women to work with, to spend time with, and to solve problems with. My journey has taken me to become a partner in a woman-founded, owned, and operated business with a staff is mostly female. It was invented right here in Buffalo. Clients come to visit us and work with us because of that very different perspective, because we help them answer long-standing problems that they have not gotten answers from the old, staunch, white guy, middle of the road, any shade of blue, don't fix it because it ain't broke, agencies, strategists, and consultants. My conversion to a full-blown unlikely feminist took place when I was witnessing firsthand the outcome of using this type of decision-making process for companies across a breadth of industries. High-tech company who saw their sales cycle cut in half and thus their revenue went crazy. A large medical facility where employee engagement went through the roof and brought with it customer satisfaction, patient satisfaction levels. Retailers, a beer company who has brand loyalty that you would love to have for your organization. So what is it about this difference between the way the old staunch white guys work and the way that women try to deal with problems? Well, for women, collaboration is key. You want to bring everybody into the conversation. You want to consider all of the options. Us guys, we're happy to end the conversation as soon as we hear the problem is solved. Women are much more willing to work in a divergent style, looking for more answers, bringing in more perspectives. Us guys, we literally want to drill down to one answer and let's get started on it. Women, and women-based prospects and perspectives, they deal with hierarchy much differently than men. We need top-down org charts and spec sheets to define how we do things. Women look to flatten organizations and shortcut decision-making processes because that's a better way to get things done. And finally, female-based processes are based and designed on why we should do things, not how we should do things. Women look to understand why a problem exists and why that solution will work better than others. Men, we just want to know how we're going to get this finished. So what is it in neuroscience that helps us understand how women's brains work? Well, this week in The Atlantic, there was an article that came out corroborating some new information that women's brains are much more highly connected between the analytical and the creative sides. Women take in information more quickly than men, and you process it in a different way, more complex patterns rather than these linear straight lines. You are open to more variation and variability in the way that you look at a problem, and you're looking for more outcomes. And overall, you apply a completely different perspective on how a problem should be solved. It struck me that if that's how women's brains are, then maybe this different perspective is that women are natural design thinkers. Design thinking is a broad, systematic way of considering a breadth of problems. And it's holistic, it's contextual in its approach. It looks at issues in a totally different way than a linear methodology. And design thinking puts the end user up front. It means that the people who are going to have to deal with the solution are the people that are kept in mind when they're putting that solution together. And most importantly, design thinking is human-centric. It keeps the human in the middle and balances it between commercial and technical needs. Design thinking doesn't start with spreadsheets and formulas and calculations. There's no linear path right to the right answer in design thinking. It's a holistic methodology. It embraces heuristics, which are rules of thumb rather than equations and set ways to fix a problem. Design thinking embraces exploration and iteration. It celebrates the fact that we can fail quickly and get up and fix that problem. It looks at things like rapid prototyping and deals with getting to a solution quicker, and not the only solution, but any solution that should work. Design thinking, it uses an iterative cycle of inspiration, where you start to understand what an idea is. Ideation, where you start to understand how you might actually solve that problem. And implementation, where you start to put the solution in place. And you cycle through that process until you've arrived at a solution that works. This is big stuff. This is literally our lives going forward. We need design thinking because your brains are literally designed to deal with what are called wicked problems. Wicked problems are social and cultural issues that are so big they affect everybody in our world. They affect our species. And unless we deal with these wicked problems, we are doomed. Our existence is relatively short-lived. Wicked problems are easily identified. We can all probably pick out a dozen of them. But the problem is they're not easily defined. We all have our own opinion of it. And that causes gridlock. That causes wicked problems to not get started to be worked on. Wicked problems are not small problems. These are large problems. These are problems that we have to face and deal with in our world before we destroy it. Wicked problems are expensive. They're unbelievably expensive to fix. Think about it. The economic implication of fixing some of these wicked problems are huge. And that means the status quo, the established status quo, wants to stay in power. And the people on the outside looking in want to destroy the systems that we have. Neither of these are the right answers. Those are both mistakes. It's actually more expensive not to fix wicked problems. Think about the expense if we don't fix global warming. And finally, wicked problems are unbelievably tangled together. And this is what makes them so tricky, because there is no obvious place to start, which is why linear thinking, which is what we've used for hundreds of years to solve our problems, won't work on wicked problems. We don't know where to start. We don't know where to finish. How could an old white guy from a staunch white guy industry ever solve a wicked problem? What's missing from the table is women and the way that your brains are wired. It's your holistic perspective will lead our businesses, our bureaucracies, and our boardrooms to start solving problems that we have thought about and been gridlocked on literally for decades. And we have to start, because by 2056, if we don't, which is when inequality is supposed to be fixed, I'm not sure that we're going to be around. Inequality, as many of you in the audience know far better than I, is a wicked problem. It's not easily defined. It's easily identified. We know that it's there. Most of the people in this room have lived with it for their whole lives. And yet, society, as much as it's tried, has had, at best, patchwork results in fixing inequality. Inequality is a symptom of other global world problems and a cause. And in true wicked problem style, I'm afraid that we haven't even begun to look at the right solutions for inequality. Inequality is long-eluded resolution. Change has been long in coming. And I believe that this is because we, and I mean all of us, all of the genders, all of the ethnicities, everybody who deals with inequality, we have been fighting the battle using that old staunch white guy methodology. We've been fighting it in a linear way. Well, it's time. It's time to treat inequality as a wicked problem, the wicked problem that it is. It's time for a new way of thinking. It's a time for design thinking. It's a time for your way of thinking. I stand here as a guy, which is, by the way, quite an honor to be here. And I'm ashamed at what we've done with our world. I think that it's time for us to all get in the game, because goodness knows there is no way that we can get by with only half of us trying to solve the problems old-fashioned ways. Thank you very much.